Welcome to the Embodied Healing Holistic Wellness Conversation Series, sponsored by the Racial Healing and Wellness Coaching Program for Women. I am Nicole Newman, co-founder of the program, and joined by my co-founder, Rosella Ide White. The purpose of this conversation series is to introduce ourselves, Racial Healing and Wellness Coaching for Women, and share some of the key practices that ground our work. This week, we will be exploring a key practice of values. Values are defined as things that you believe are important in the way you live and work. You can quickly identify your values by reflecting on how you're spending your time, your energy, your money, and any other resources you have. When we are living in alignment with our values, they determine our priorities, and they can be the measures you use to tell if your life is turning out the way you want it to. Our values serve as a compass that orients us to a life that reflects our deepest held beliefs.
A key component of the work that we do is to always begin with a grounding. And so today for our grounding, I'm going to be sharing an excerpt from The Summer We Got Free, which is by Mia McKenzie, who is the creator of Black Girl Dangerous. Listen to these words on getting free. A long time ago, when you were a wee thing, you learned something, some way to cope, something that if you did it would help you survive. It wasn't the healthiest thing. It wasn't going to get you free, but it was going to keep you alive. You learned it at 5 or 6, and it worked. It really did help you survive. You carried it with you all your life, used it whenever you needed it. It got you out of your ass backwards town, away from an abuser, out of range of your mother's unlove, or whatever. It worked for you. You're still here now, partly because of this thing that you learned. The thing is, though, at some point, you stopped needing it. You got far enough away, surrounded yourself with people who love you. You survived. And because you survived, you now had a shot at more than just staying alive. You had a shot now at getting free. But that thing that you learned when you were 5 was not then and is not now designed to help you be free. It is designed only to help you survive. And in fact, it keeps you from being free. You need to figure out what this thing is and work your ass off to unlearn it. Because the things we learn to do to survive at all costs are not the things that will help us get free. Getting free is a whole different journey altogether.
Thank you.
Thank you. And I really love that piece because I think it's a perfect invitation to reflect on one's values, on those things that were ingrained in you, on those things that carried you thus far, but those things that may not actually be working in service of what you want now. So when we talk about values, right, this is one of the 4 practices that are integral to our work of racial healing and wellness coaching. So the first we talked about last week was spirituality. This week, we're diving more deeply into values. Next week will be relationships. And finally, we'll end with embodiment. We have these possibilities that define our program. So based on what we practice, we believe that these practices make certain things possible. And when it comes to our values, we believe that when we clarify them, when we uncover them, when we ask the good and hard questions of, are we living in alignment with our values or are we not, that leads us to become bold in our beliefs around racial justice and equity. So what is it that you value, right? When was the last time you reflected on that question, answered that question, wondered about that question? And as Nicole shared at the beginning of today's series conversation, she said, values can actually be spotted based on reflecting on how we spend our time, our resources, our energy. So anyone who knows me knows that I value reality TV. Why? Because I spend time watching and texting. Actually, one of our team members, I won't name who they are, but we text all the time about what's happening on a certain Real Housewives franchise series, right? And I spend time doing that. But it's fine, right? Yeah. We value it. And honestly, I'm okay with that value. There was a time when there were other things that I was doing regularly that the more I reflected on it, I was like, oh, wait,
Mm,
because I'm doing this, I'm spending the time, the energy, the resource in it. That means I must value it. And here's the thing, it wasn't just things that I was doing out there, it was also ways of being in terms of how
mm,
I treated or didn't treat myself. It was how I did or didn't show up in relationships, right?
mm,
I could tell what I valued by what I was doing. So when we think about this work of racial healing and wellness coaching, right, a core practice is first and foremost to identify your values. You say that you want racial healing. You say that you're invested in wellness. You say that equity and justice are integral and important to you or to the communities you're a part of, to the space that you inhabit. But how are your values reflecting that stated importance?
mm,
How are you spending your time in service of racial justice and equity? What resources are you committing to this work? What are the places and spaces and people that you engage that reflect this value? Or is it a value in name only? The other thing
mm,
that the grounding piece I think invited us to was what Nicole and I have been talking a lot about recently, the work of compassion. So
mm,
this notion that, okay, there was something that I valued or that was instilled in me as a value when I was 5 or 6, and that actually helped me to survive. And so I look back on that, not with judgment or shame or anything. I just take stock of it. I notice it, right? This was something that was integral for me being where I am today. And I get to now ask the question of how does that value, that way of being, that ideal, that belief align with where I want to go? And
mm,
if I'm honest, how does that value support not simply my surviving, but my thriving and the thriving of other people? Because it's not
mm.
just about me, right? This work is ultimately communal in nature. And so I think we have to constantly be reflecting on our values at every stage and season of life, right? It's an ongoing journey. It's not a one and done. It's not stagnant. It's constantly flowing and moving.
I love what you're saying because I think it so beautifully connects to the other possibility, right? That feels connected to our program, and that is that folks become mindful of their biases, their words, and their actions. And for us, I think that why that feels connected to values
Mm.
is because those things are an outpouring of what's inward, right? How you show up in your actions with your words in terms of your internal beliefs, right? Your own biases is a direct correlation to what's internal, what's stewing on what do you value? How are you
Mm.
what do you prioritize, right? What's important to you? Where are you spending your time? Where are you getting your information? Like all of those things are so critical. And so for us, part of what we seek to do in our program is help people to become aware of that,
Yeah.
right? So if you are someone who lives at the margins, who has been told that you have no inherent value other than what you produce, how you show up, how loud you are, how much you demand justice, and you
Mhm.
don't actually, you're not in touch with the quieter, the more contemplative side of you, right? Then the question is, are you living in alignment with your values, right? Is that who you want to be, right? So part of what we do in our program is help people become choiceful about their values, right? For folks who are living the lie of white body supremacy, right? It's about how are your biases showing up over and over again to create
Yeah.
both oppression for other people, but oppression for you, right? How are
Yeah.
you complicit in your own oppression by holding on to some deeply held values that you can't shake, you've been unwilling to interrogate? And so part of our program is helping people to become choiceful with that, to interrogate those and to make decisions about how they want to show up outwardly, behavior, actions, um, relationships, through some really serious conversations about what they value.
Absolutely. I love when you use the phrase choiceful because I think that a key value that we have right, that is practiced in the container of the Racial Healing and Wellness Coaching Program for women is that we remind women of their agency and their ability to make choices, right? We get back to saying that this could have been a value, but guess what? You can shift and you get to decide. You get to choose what it is that is central, what it is that you are being called to do, you want to do. And we allow you to, or not we allow you, we invite you to do that in the context of a container of support. Because this is not, even though it's simple, it's not
Right.
easy.
Right. And I
Right?
think it's also indicative of of being in of working with women. Right. So much of what the indoctrination process of being identified as or identifying as a woman is to feel like things are being done to you, right? That there's no agency or choice. And in some ways that is real. Patriarchy has created conditions that have real tangible outcomes. And I always am like, and then how do we chip away 1 inch of that inside of that, right? So if I don't believe I have agency, then I can very easily give it up.
And one of the reasons we do this work is because we do believe we have agency, right? We do believe that there is something that we can not just do, but another way of being that will change our collective reality.
Exactly.
And it's not that we believe it happens overnight. It's not that we believe this is the only way. This program, Racial Healing and Wellness Coaching, is one way, a way that is undergirded by these practices of spirituality, of values, of relationships, and of embodiment that help us see what's possible, right? I kind of showed my hand at the first by giving away what I value based on how I spend my time. What's something you value based on how you spend your time and resources and energy?
So, Harry and I were having this conversation, my partner and I was having this conversation because I have always valued work. I've been working since I was old enough to do it. And so I spend a lot of time working. And the question that has been emerging for me recently is this question of like, is that what you value the most? And if
based
it
on how you
isn't,
spend your time.
right. And if it isn't, what needs to shift in your life?
Yeah.
And one of the things I love about this work in this program is that this is not work that we're not doing. Like I'm like, ooh, we're doing this with other people. And the more I interrogate my own values, the more I see that I have room for growth and room for refinement and room for more choice and room for me to examine what am I right? How do I, you and I have had that conversation about grind culture where I was just like, I don't agree. Sometimes you just gotta suck it up and grind, right? But I'm emerging from that. And it's hard, right? Because in the absence of a clearly defined another value, there's a gap.
In the absence of a clearly defined other value, there's a gap. And in that gap, what we tend to do, because it's both human nature, because it's how we're wired, because it's how the brain works, is we will always revert back to what was if we haven't clearly defined what will be. Right?
We don't stay in the ambiguity of redefining our values long enough for something else to emerge.
And this again goes back to why it's so important to do so much of this work in community, because I think that when we think about ambiguity, we think about liminal space, we think about the gray shade, like shades of gray versus things being binary, black and white. All of that requires, I think, communal support to navigate, to be present in, to engage those spaces. Because I don't know about you, but when I'm in that space of liminality, if I don't have people who are continuing to remind me of the work I'm doing, continuing to remind me of who I am, continuing to call me back to what I say I want, continuing to remind me that I know it's so cliche that both this too shall pass and there's something holy in the waiting. It's so easy for me just to revert back, to say, no, I'm not, I don't want to. Like, this is too much. This is too hard. But when we're, especially when we're thinking about racial justice, when we're thinking about equity, when we're thinking about the dismantling of these systems and structures and institutions that have been oppressive, but that have also been meted out by individuals, right? We can always blame systems and structures, but systems and structures were designed by people and are perpetuated by people. So it always has to be the macro, the micro, the meso. Like, we have to do all of that interrogation and inquiry and dismantling, and you have to do it in community. And so what we're inviting people to ultimately is a community that is based in a coaching modality, a cohort that will invite you to have the serious and the hard conversations, most importantly with yourself, right? Like,
first and foremost,
uncover, discover, recover, or create new values that are ultimately in alignment with what you say you believe and what you want.
Well, and I also think that one of the things that, if I feel like it's really easy, is like to be so clear on your values that you never need support, right? I mean, I was like this very early on in my career and in my life, where I'm like, here are my values, right? And you could never get me to go against my values, because right is right, and I'm justified, and I'm angry, and I'm fighting on the good side, and I'm full of rage, right? And I think the more you keep living, the more those things become nuanced, right? And so what I think community does is it invites us to interrogate our own contradictions, and to interrogate the ways where we might be holding on to a value that we've outgrown.
Yeah.
That's no longer serving us, and doesn't serve the we talked about spirituality, but doesn't serve the divine's higher purpose for our life.
Yep.
Right. I have held on to values past when they were hurting me and causing pain and confusion and
so when they've spoiled, right? They've been past, they went past their expiration date.
And it wasn't until I was able to let them go that something else could come into my life.
So it's both this work of letting the thing go, but also discerning what the new thing will be and navigating the space between. Because I think that it's not as easy as saying, this was the value, this is the new value, and now we're done. It was, this was the value. I'm recognizing that this value no longer is aiding me. It's not in service of the freedom and liberation and justice I'm wanting to see and experience and help create. And I'm not necessarily clear on what the new value is, but I'm going to be in the space long enough to sit with and consider and hear from other people and engage in learning. And there's nothing for me like learning, experiential learning, or just reading, like all the ways that we learn that help then get to the clarification of what that new thing will be.
And it's like,
and then
you have to
testing
be
it
a
out.
seeker.
You have to be a seeker.
If this program is for seekers, that's what I'm clear about. It's like, it's not for the people who are dogmatic, who have everything figured out, who know all of the answers, right? Who are not in questioning. This program is for the seekers amongst us, right? The people who are willing to sit on the edge
and wonder
and be curious about themselves and others,
and ultimately about what's possible. Right? Oh, this is good. This is good.
It is. All right. So as we wrap up this conversation series, we invite you to consider the questions below. and to think about for yourself, what are the values that undergird your life? Are those values, are any of those values at their expiration date? Are
Mm.
you a seeker, right? Are you curious about what could take their place? And we also invite you to join us next Wednesday as we discuss our third practice of relationships. Please also sign up to receive our free resource, Bridging the Gap, from Black History Month to Women's History Month, that will be available February 15th. This resource invites you to reflect on the practices that help you embody the possibilities of racial healing and wellness. And make sure you follow us on social media. We are at Racial Heal Well on Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook for now.
Thank you so much for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye-bye.